Carmen Sandiego.
A cultural icon, without a doubt. But there's something under the surface. Beyond the style, the incredible heists. Something much deeper that I think we all share. The shadow self.
Shadow self. Okay, that sounds kind of ominous. What exactly is this shadow self?
It's like the flip side of the personality we show the world, right? Those desires and impulses that we keep hidden, the parts that don't fit that image, we carefully create.
Okay, so we've all got this hidden side lurking beneath the surface, but what does that have to do with Carmen Sandiego?
Well, she embodies a lot of those classic shadow traits. Thrill-seeking, a little moral ambiguity, and that knack for manipulation. By looking at her actions, we can learn some pretty fascinating things about our own hidden selves.
I'm hooked already. So let's start with the obvious. Carmen's a thief, but it's not just about the loot, is it? There's got to be a thrill-seeking element to these crimes.
Absolutely. Remember that scene in the Netflix series where she breaks into Eile Island as a kid?
Oh, yeah.
That wasn't just curiosity. That was a deliberate pursuit of danger. And it's interesting. A lot of us have a bit of a daredevil inside.
So you're saying that urge for excitement, to push the boundaries, maybe even a little bit of danger, that could be the shadow self poking through.
It's definitely possible. Think about a time you took a risk, maybe even when you knew better. Was it really logic driving you, or was there something deeper there, a more primal urge?
Okay, you're making me think. Carmen's not all about thrills, right? She's also, well, she's morally ambiguous. Seals, but often for what seem like good reasons, like she's got her own code of ethics.
Exactly. That Venetian mask incident, for example, technically she stole it, a priceless artifact. But her motive was to protect it.
Yeah.
Make sure it didn't fall into the wrong hands. Classic case of what psychologists call moral disengagement.
Moral disengagement. So are you saying we're all capable of being mini Carmen Sandiegos, bending the rules when it suits us?
We all have that ability to rationalize what we do, even when it clashes with our usual moral compass. Think about those little white lies, those times you bent the rules to get ahead. Are those truly harmless, or are we tapping into that Machiavellian streak? The one that Carmen embodies so well.
Okay, now it's getting personal.
Huh.
But I see your point. We all have those moments where we convince ourselves the ends justify the means.
Precisely. And that moral complexity is one of the things that makes her so fascinating. We can't just label her as good or bad. And that forces us to look at those shades of gray within ourselves.
It's like she's holding up a mirror to our own internal struggles.
Exactly. And that's one reason exploring her through this lens of the shadow self can be so insightful.
Okay, so we've got thrill-seeking, we've got moral ambiguity. What other shadow traits does Carmen exhibit?
Well, there's a definite theme of vengeance versus justice running through a lot of her escapades.
Ah, yes. Like that episode where she targets a VILE operative. And you can't really tell, is it about justice? Or is it settling a score?
It's a complex question. It speaks to that primal urge for retribution, the one that a lot of us harbor. Seeing someone who wronged us get what they deserve feels pretty good, right? Even liberating.
I think we've all felt that urge at some point. Revenge is a dish best served cold, as they say.
But the real question is this: where does justice end and revenge begin? Carmen's actions force us to confront those blurry lines within ourselves. Think about a time someone got under your skin. Did you ever, even just for a second, imagine them getting what was coming to them?
Maybe. Okay, point taken. But Carmen's not all about taking down the bad guys, right? There's also that whole struggle with identity, her place in the world.
That's right. You see it in her complicated relationship with VILE. There are times when she hesitates, almost doesn't want to betray the organization, almost like she's torn between who she is and who she was raised to be.
Yeah, like in that episode where she could have easily escaped but she stayed, tried to protect someone she cared about within VILE. It's almost like a part of her still feels like she belongs there.
This speaks to the shadow's role in shaping who we are. We suppress parts of ourselves to fit in, to meet expectations, or even to protect ourselves from pain.
So you're saying those parts we hide, those shadow traits, they actually contribute to who we are, even if we don't want to admit it.
Absolutely. And the question Carmen's story poses to us is, are we living as our authentic selves, or are we playing a role that's been, imposed upon us? It's a question worth thinking about because it can be hard to separate who we truly are from who we think we should be.
Okay, I'm seeing how deep this goes. We've got thrill-seeking, moral ambiguity, vengeance, and identity. What other shadows are we dealing with in Carmen's world?
Well, let's not forget her incredible skill as a manipulator. She's a master of deception, uses her charm and wit to get exactly what she wants.
Absolutely. Always 10 steps ahead, setting up elaborate schemes, playing people like chess pieces.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because it makes us confront those times when we've used manipulation to our advantage. Think about those tiny white lies. Those times you stretched the truth to get what you wanted.
Wait, are you saying we're all secret manipulators?
Not necessarily, but it's about recognizing we all have the capacity for it, even if we don't always act on it. And understanding this aspect of ourselves can help us navigate those social situations with more awareness and, integrity.
So is this manipulative streak in Carmen, is that something to repress? Or is there a way to use it, I don't know, for good?
That's a question we'll definitely delve into further. But first, let's talk about another key aspect of Carmen's personality, her tendency to push people away. Avoid any kind of emotional vulnerability.
Carmen playing hard to get with emotions. That doesn't sound like the confident woman we see on screen.
Well, that's the thing about the shadow self, right? It often reflects our deep mountain insecurities. She may be a master thief, but even Carmen struggles with vulnerability, with intimacy.
So all that swagger, the independence, could that actually be a mask, a way to keep people at a distance?
It's possible. Think about it. If you don't let anyone in, you can't get hurt. But then you live a life in emotional isolation.
Makes me think about her relationship with her team, Zach and Ivy. They're loyal, but she never lets them get too close.
Exactly. She shares the mission, relies on their skills, but rarely shows her true feelings. It's like there's this invisible wall up to protect herself. And that's something I think many of us can relate to.
So how does this tendency to push people away, how does that play out in our lives?
Well, think about a time you shut down emotionally. Maybe after a disappointment or a betrayal. That urge to withdraw, to build those walls around your heart. That could be your shadow self trying to protect you from more pain.
Okay, so maybe we are all a little bit Carmen Sandiego, guarding our hearts like they're priceless treasures. But what about those times when our shadow self leads us to, sabotage ourselves? Like when Carmen's overconfidence almost blows a mission.
That's a great example of how these shadow traits can be both, right? Assets and liabilities. Her confidence is key to her success. But when it crosses over into arrogance, it blinds her to dangers.
There's a pattern here, isn't there? It's like those same qualities that make her so captivating. The thrill-seeking, the cunning, the self-reliance. They can also lead to her downfall.
And that duality, that's what makes the shadow self so fascinating. It's not about good or bad. It's about understanding how they shape our behavior, how they impact our lives.
Okay, we've explored a lot of Carmen's shadow traits, the good, the bad, and the complex. But where do we go from here? How do we actually deal with our own shadow selves?
The first step is awareness. We have to identify those shadow impulses within ourselves. Jealousy, anger, the need to control, that desire to escape through risk-taking.
So shine a light on the dark corners of the psyche, right? But what happens when we do that? Is it, I don't know, scary?
It can be, but it's also incredibly freeing. Once we acknowledge those traits, we can understand them, work with them, even integrate them into our personalities in a healthy way.
I'm all for self-improvement, but how? How do we go from being controlled by our shadows to mastering them?
It's a process, not a quick fix, that's for sure. And it starts with self-compassion. We have to stop judging ourselves for having these impulses. Everyone has them. It's part of being human.
So not denying those darker aspects, but accepting them.
Exactly. Once we accept them, then we can ask ourselves some important questions like, what triggers these impulses? How do they show up in our lives? Are they helping us or are they sabotaging us?
Okay, so we've asked those questions. What's next? How do we change those patterns that aren't working?
That's where the real work comes in. It's about finding healthy outlets for those shadow energies.
Give me an example. Say my shadow self is all about control. I need to be in charge, even if it stresses me out. How do I turn that into something good?
Well, instead of trying to control everything in your life, you could channel that energy, maybe into a creative project or a leadership role where those organizational skills would be valuable. It's about finding a constructive way to express it.
So not erasing the traits, but redirecting them.
Exactly. Like Carmen. She could have easily used her skills just for her own gain, but she fights injustice, challenges those who abuse power. She takes those shadow traits and turns them into something, well, good.
That's a powerful way to think about it. So we all have the potential to be a little bit Carmen Sandiego, using our shadow selves to make a positive impact.
Absolutely. And it's not always about outward actions. Sometimes the most important shadow work is internal.
What do you mean?
Think about the shadow traits that hold us back: self-doubt, fear of failure, the need for approval. Working with those can be really transformative.
But how do we tackle those? They seem much harder to deal with than, say, needing to be in control.
It's challenging for sure, but it's possible. One powerful technique is to cultivate self-compassion. Instead of beating ourselves up for our flaws, what if we treated ourselves with kindness, with understanding?
That sounds great. But is that just letting ourselves off the hook?
Not at all. It's recognizing that we're all works in progress, we have strengths and weaknesses, and by accepting our imperfections, that's how we start making real progress.
This is making me rethink everything about personal growth. But I have to ask, what about the shadow traits that are just, well, harmful? Anger, jealousy, a thirst for revenge. How do we deal with those?
That's where things get really interesting. It's about finding ways to express those emotions healthily, without causing harm to ourselves or anyone else.
Okay, but how? Do we just suppress those feelings, try to ignore them?
No, no,
Yeah.
suppression only makes them stronger. It's about acknowledging them, understanding where they come from, and then finding a constructive outlet for them.
That makes sense. What kind of outlets?
It depends on the individual, on the specific trait. For someone struggling with anger, it might be physical exercise, creative expression, maybe therapy. The key is to release that energy without hurting anyone.
This is so insightful. It's like taking back control from those impulses that used to control us.
Exactly. And this process of shadow integration, it's not just about us. It can also impact our relationships.
Oh, how so? How does understanding our shadow self help us connect with others?
Well, when we're aware of our own shadow traits, we're less likely to project them onto other people.
Wait, projection, what's that?
Projection is when we take our own uncomfortable feelings, our own traits, and we attribute them to someone else. For example, if I'm secretly insecure about my intelligence, I might be super critical of other people's intellect.
Oh, I see. So by working on our own shadows, we can actually improve our relationships.
Absolutely. When we own our stuff, we stop blaming others for our problems.
Yeah.
We can communicate more honestly, more compassionately, and we build stronger, more authentic connections.
This is mind-blowing. I feel like we've just scratched the surface. Is there anything else we should know about this shadow work, about how it impacts our lives?
Well, there's one more crucial aspect of shadow integration we need to talk about, and it ties back to Carmen Sandiego in a pretty profound way.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's this final piece of the puzzle?
Yeah.
I'm ready. What's this crucial aspect of shadow integration we haven't covered yet?
It's about finding the courage to really live authentically, even if it means, going against the grain, challenging those societal norms and expectations.
Sounds a bit rebellious.
Yeah.
And very Carmen Sandiego. She's always outside the system, makes her own rules.
Exactly. She's a perfect example of someone who refuses to be defined by what society says. She's a thief, yes, but she uses those skills to fight injustice, to expose the corruption, not afraid to challenge authority or question the status quo at all.
Okay, I see the connection. But we can't all be globe-trotting master criminals, right? How do we apply that rebellious spirit to our own lives?
It's not about breaking the law. It's about breaking free from those limiting beliefs, those expectations that hold us back. It's about asking ourselves, what really matters? What kind of life do I want to create?
So aligning our actions with our values, even if those values, I don't know, don't fit into those neat little boxes society gives us.
Exactly. Having the courage to be ourselves, even if it means going against the grain. Think about those times you felt pressure to conform, maybe to fit in with a certain group or meet someone else's expectations. In those moments, you might have been suppressing your shadow self, those qualities that make you unique.
Oh, I've definitely felt that pressure. It's like this struggle, right? Between wanting to belong and wanting to be true to myself.
And that's a challenge we all face. But here's the thing. When we deny those shadow parts of ourselves, we actually diminish our own light.
So you're saying that embracing our shadows is essential for a fulfilling life.
Absolutely. When we integrate those hidden aspects, we become more whole, more authentic, more powerful.
This is such a different way to think about personal growth. It's not about striving for some perfect version of ourselves. It's about embracing all of who we are, even the shadows.
Exactly. And it's not always going to be easy. There will be times when our shadow selves, well, they lead us astray, we make mistakes, maybe even hurt others. But even in those moments, there's a chance for growth, for learning.
So what's the key takeaway? How do we put this into practice?
I'll leave you with this. The next time you feel that tug from your shadow self, That impulse to rebel, to challenge, to break free, don't be afraid of it. Lean in, explore it, because you never know, it might just unlock your true potential.
Wow, that's inspiring. It's like Carmen always says, it's all about how you play the game. But in this case, the game is life. Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the psychology of Carmen Sandiego. Until next time.